fellow Americans, tonight we had the opportunity to hear the State of the Union address by the leader of our great nation, the President of the United States, as well as the Republican response that was given by Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas. And I wanted to take this opportunity to give my consensus or my point of view, my response, as it were. In the State of the Union, President Biden recounted a number of things. He highlighted that that the economy has added 12.1 million new jobs between the first month of he was in office and January of this year 2023. He cited a new law called the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act that would produce hundreds of thousands of new jobs as well. One thing we did see, he highlighted his intent, or he telegraphed his intent to highlight bipartisanship throughout the State of the Union address. He touched on a number of pocketbook issues as well. I won't go into detail on any of those, but I will highlight the fact that he did speak on the Tyre Nichols situation, and he did touch on the issue of mass shootings in this country by saying that, talking about the studio shootings that occurred recently and the fact that high-powered automatic rifles need to be regulated. He talked about the economy, that there has been improvement. He talked about the fact that that certain congressmen wanted to do away with Medicare and Social Security, and he would not let that happen. So basically, he said that the state of our union is strong because of the strong backbone that the country has, and it has allowed us to be strong. So he gave a pretty positive aspect to the State of the Union address. Now, after that, we heard the Republican response by Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas. First thing she said, she said, forgive her that she did not believe everything that was said during the State of the Union. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that was said, the Republicans are going to counter it, and they're not going to want to agree with it. That was evident because you saw a lot of the heckling that was going on during the State of the Union. There was even a camera shot that was panned to Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was totally in agreement, and I think she was calling out President Biden on some of the things that he said. Sarah Huckabee Sanders also talked about how Democrats have been wanting to seize power, how they've hijacked the presidency, something that I don't necessarily agree with. She said that from out of control inflation to violent crime to the dangerous border crisis, she referred, and the threat from China, Biden and the Democrats have failed you. She kept saying that the Democrats were failing. She goes, and they know it, we know it as Americans, and it's time for change. She stressed that the Republicans wanted to change for the better. She even called for a new generation of Republican leadership. She said, at 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country, and at 80, he is the oldest president in American history. I mean, it's an honest fact, unfortunately, but that's the case. So both sides have really come up and touched on some items. Now, the reality of our State of the Union right now is that our country is politically divided now more than ever. It has been always in the past, but it became more evident and more defined upon the onset of COVID-19. When COVID-19 threatened our country, It created, or didn't create, but there began to appear a feeling of rebellion that ensued between politicians of the left and the right, if you want to call it that way, between Americans who were taking sides, and it, it created arguments that should have not been, I guess, initiated at that point in time. Without getting too specific, I'm talking about the mitigation strategies that were activated to try to combat the contagion of the virus. When this occurred, there was a movement of politicians that said, okay, this is violating rights and freedoms. It's an issue that I think if it would have occurred in another scenario other than the pandemic, it may have been more valid than it ended up being. Given the fact that it occurred during a pandemic, I don't think it was the most appropriate time to enter into that specific type of debate and turn these items into political fodder, I guess you can call it. This rebellion, this division has trickled down from federal government, the federal Congress, to state governments, to local governments, where we have Republican state governments oppressing Democratic local governments, and that's something that, in all honesty, is uncalled for in our country. I think, and I believe that as Americans, we need to look beyond the political window. Everything that has occurred with this division and this spirit of rebellion has brought us closer and closer to the brink of a political crisis. This was clearly evident even in the election of 2020 when the transition occurred on January 6th. The videos, we as Americans saw live on TV occurring at the Capitol, that evidence is irrefutable as to what occurred. I mean, clearly what occurred was not correct, was not legal, was dangerous. It's evidence that of the division that our country has been suffering. Okay, another reality that our country is facing is the tragedy of multiple mass shootings that have occurred over time. Over the past year, this was something that was very lightly touched upon in both the State of the Union and the Republican response. The fact of the matter is that nothing has been done to prevent these tragedies. Our elected officials on the Republican side have been led to believe that the Second Amendment guarantees the right to free and clear to bear arms. But this right that we see in the Second Amendment is not without some form of responsibility. I'm reminded of this very important line in one of the movies that was brought out from Marvel comic universe. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think this is very true when it comes to weapons, when it comes to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is this great power, but with this great power comes a great responsibility. And I think this responsibility has to have some semblance of regulation. With regulation, we can achieve that responsibility, which we have failed to obtain. Our Republican congressmen have chosen to cite issues like mental health, securing the schools, as if they were the only venue that honestly were the venue of choice for these particular tragedies. That's not the case. We've seen over time that these mass shootings have occurred in supermarkets, have occurred in dance clubs, schools, movie theaters. So there's not one specific venue of choice, and to try to protect all these venues would require an immense amount of manpower, of police power, which I mean I don't think just any one city would be able to handle. If you understand what I'm saying, they've also our politicians have also elected to line their pockets with cash. There are politicians that have so affiliated themselves with organizations such as the NRA that receive immense, momentous amounts of money as donations to promote this right to bear arms without regulation. I believe our country today, our politicians need to come together and do what is the responsible ideal, and that is to assume the responsibility and own the mistake and come forward and do what is necessary to prevent these needless tragedies from occurring. Unfortunately, unless something is done, these mass shootings will continue over and over and over again, and that's the sad reality. Another classic example of division in our country is the fact that we have governors, specifically Republican governors, that are fighting against the administration, the presidential administration, the federal government. The prime example of this is the ongoing border situation in Texas, and the fact that the governor has been trying to get the president to come and secure the border, blaming the president for the failure at the border, when the reality is that the failure itself is not completely the president's responsibility. Our borders, our immigration system is a series of laws that have to be maintained, have to be updated, and it is Congress's responsibility to pass legislation to upgrade and update our immigration system. Our immigration system is so overwhelmed it's broken. That's the reality. What needs to happen is Congress needs to get active and do something to pass legislation to improve and to correct the issue. That's a given. Okay. There's not more cut and shoot than that. The fault for this issue is it's demonstrated by history. Our Congress has failed for over 40 years, 4 decades, in passing the necessary legislation to correct our borders. They haven't done it. Are they ever going to do it, is the question. Congress must own this issue. It must own it and address it. That is a certain thing. The fact of the matter remains that our U.S. Congress, rather than work together for the betterment of our country, they choose to remain at each other's throats and denigrate and accuse and find faults with the other. One party will continuously find issues with whatever the other party does or proposes to do and says, no, this is wrong. Conservatives, for example, will continue to insult and denigrate our presidential administration at every step. Every step that the president makes, simply because the president is a Democrat. It's democratic. The division is no longer about the person. It is about the party affiliation. As citizens of this great country, can we give credence to what has been said in either the State of the Union or the Republican response without any political bias? Are we that much divided amongst ourselves that we don't know what or who to believe anymore? As American people, we must, going forward, look beyond political affiliations and beyond the politics that our elected officials profess to defend. The sad reality is that the numbers of elected officials, elected senators, representatives, they have all been poisoned by this division. Elected politicians, for example, expect our administration to execute resolutions at the risk of harming innocent civilians. This is evident on Twitter over the last few days. Politicians have been criticizing that the president did not shoot down the Chinese balloon when it first entered the country. The decision was not totally his. It was made by the Pentagon. Enough said. The Pentagon did not want to risk injuring civilians with the immense amount of debris that would have been created by bringing this balloon down. Okay? The political party is bent on revenge against their colonies across the aisle. Yet, when those within their own party, and I'm talking about the Republican Party, those within their own party that are guilty of the same sins are not being held accountable. They're being overlooked. There has to be complete accountability on both sides of the aisle, not just one. We come together as American citizens of this great country, and call out and bring to accountability those as our elected representatives. We need to call them out. We must think clearly with our hearts. We must, not with our political mindsets. Our call to unity is that much more urgent now than ever. We must let our elected officials know and understand that the urgency of working together now is much more critical than the necessity of fighting each other and arguing against their political counterparts across the aisle. We must not allow ourselves to be poisoned by the political venom that has overcome our elected officials. It is our duty as Americans to look outside the box, to bring our elected officials to accountability for the betterment of our country and the restoration of our great nation. We can ask no more, we can ask no less. Thank you, and God bless America.